Next on our agenda, we've got Tommy Fairfield, Executive Director of JCUA, Jackson County Utility Authority. Tommy, I recognize you're on a limited time schedule tonight due to a prior commitment. We changed the meeting on you, Tommy, and we appreciate you allowing us that flexibility to bring it tonight instead of last meeting. So you're on.
All right, thank you. As you recall, I had requested this.
Tommy, the mic's kind of directional. You have to speak pretty close to it.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Y'all just throw something at me if I miss it. We've had several meetings over the last several months, but at least at one of them, and it might be with our board president, Mike Murphy, your representative on the board. I said I would come and talk to the flow report that you get each month to see what our takeaways are from it and see if we can have some increased dialogue in there and make sure we understand everything that everyone is seeing as a whole, and more specifically with City of Pascagoula. The other item will be, I'm going to make some remarks on the plants. So I'm going to kind of split my time there, if you will. But it's my understanding you have this flow report. Is that correct? It was your exhibit?
That's correct.
Okay. It's
Do we have it for the screen, Stephen? Flow report? It was.
No.
Okay.
But the council does have it.
Yes.
Okay. This document predates me by a long shot. It's been around, it's changed with members, but it is a document that's been used by the authority, by the old wastewater authority, going back at least 15 years that I'm aware of. And it's a way they use to balance the flow. The membership has changed over time. If you look back around 2000, some of the agencies and companies that are on here now did not exist then. So I can't speculate as to why all of it's balanced the way it is, other than to say it was 4 original members from 4 cities, essentially 4 treatment plants. Goshen might have been utility district then, but nonetheless it was one of the plants. And you reported things in average daily flow, so I can only surmise that's the way they chose to calculate flow rates and come up with how they do that. But looking at the data in front of you, because the report goes out to everybody, and we welcome dialogue back at the staff level. Sometimes we dig into things and see what can we see. The first thing, if you reference back to your billing, you're told what percentage is your flat rate that you're being billed for the year associated with of our budget. And in the case of Pascagoula, that's what, 26.72%, I believe is what you're told. So right now you can see you're running above that, and the projection was simply 3 years average flow characteristics, mixing in all the different agencies. So everybody's arrived at the same way. Because years ago I asked, well, I know I'm adding X number of customers, can we not reproject with me? And the answer was no, it has to be done the same way. You know that's happening, put the money in savings and pay it next year when you have catch up. So that's what I did. So if you look at where you were last year, you were at 27.86, you're 29.11. So if I'm reading it, I want to know why. Since I'm paying by percentage, that tells me my chunk's getting bigger. So I would be asking those things. If you look across the board, let me say something about rainfall on here. Rainfall that you see here is not area specific. That's the average from all our rain gauges. So as you know, we've been in a pattern the last several months where Pascagoula may get more rain than the west side of the county. So your staff can always ask, well, what's the rain gauge of Pascagoula if we need to look at that? And do more detail in there and figure that out. So Pascagoula's up. If you look at the total amount of wastewater sent, this is not a percentage on there, but you could do the math. Well, 12.5% is your average daily flow right now over last year. Not your piece of the puzzle, but how much has your flow increased in 1 year? But what's everybody else doing? Because everything's relative. Moss Point is up 11%. Escatawba Utility District's up 25%, and Goshen's up 8%, and West Jackson County Utility District's down 14%, and the agency as a whole, what is everybody doing? That's up 7% when you look at the front page. The second pages, those are different contracts. All of that flow is basically taken back out before you come over to this page. So, what are the takeaways and what can we look at? We analyze the data, but we only see it from the wholesale standpoint. We don't know what retail is, so Mike's been working hard on that lately, and we work with Jackie, and we're looking into some questions now, but I want to point out some of the things that we've come up with that may tell us different things that happen. I&I. Everybody hears that word. I'm just going to read this from the EPA to talk about it very quickly. Virtually every sewer system has some infiltration or inflow. Historically, small amounts of I&I are expected and tolerated. However, infiltration and inflow may be considered excessive when it's the cause of overflows or bypasses. Well, we have those from time to time. And if the cost to treat and transport the I&I exceeds the cost to eliminate it. In cases where an I&I may not be considered excessive from a cost to eliminate perspective but causes health or environmental risk, corrective action is also required. So I can't tell a whole lot about that from this report. I see numbers that go up when they rain, but I also know I'm standing in the most industrialized county in the state. I do think that is still the fact. So if we look at yesterday, I wanted to see exactly what did it happen when it rained, because that's a very short event. It's over with. And prior to the rain, the PMP plant, which is treating Pascagoula and Moss Point wastewater right up to about 4 o'clock, was running around 6 million gallons a day. It goes up a little bit during the day. And that was the rate at which it was treating. At 4 o'clock, it skyrocketed on up to about 8 o'clock at night. It was treating 20 million gallons a day. That's how much the rate increased in that short window. Rain stopped, it went back down, and by 9 o'clock this morning, it had leveled back off at 7.4 million gallons. So what that does tell me is the plant immediately responds to rain. That's not unusual. Textbooks tell you that. The question is, though, where did the rain come from? I think that's a very important distinction for Pascagoula for takeaways, and I think it's something we need to work on and look at and work with your staff. And we've brought some things to her attention, and I told her I was going to mention this. We really need to look at it constructively and see what does it mean. You have industrial customers, so and so does Moss Point. That's part of the Escatawba thing. That's one thing I noticed there. What two areas increased the most? The Escatawba treatment plant and the Moss Point. Well, Escatawba serves a lot of area that is force main collection system, which should not be subjective to a tremendous amount of I&I necessarily. I don't know it for 100% what it's got, but the part that I rode, it has a lot of collection system that's closed. But I do know it serves industrial clients, so we're looking there as well. The industry is important. Why? Many of the industries have large areas of land, acreage, that they are required to send the wastewater for treatment, as opposed to putting it in a storm system. And, you know, we are looking at that. In 2014, we had a meeting at our office where we had DEQ here. There were members of this city present, and we went over some of the regulations coming. But I'm just going to look at a part of your agreement here and point out you have an agreement signed in 6th day of December 2011 with one of your industrial customers, and it gives a rate of $3.43 per thousand. I don't know if you've since revised that. This is what the customer files with us in their report.
Can you tell me who the customer is?
First Chemical.
First Chemical? Is that correct?
Yes, First
Okay.
Chemical Corporation.
And you're referencing a contract that the city of Pascagoula has with them that was executed December 6, 2011?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And the point I make with that is that's an example of an industrial customer that has to deliver their water to a collection system. So how much did the city say they could send? Well, the city said they could send 600,000 gallons per day. So I looked at their reporting to see what did they send, and their average daily flow is 258,000 gallons per day is what they report. Now, we're going to work with your staff to look at that, but that's a huge chunk of wastewater. That's $338,000 or 9.6% of your entire wastewater bill if you bill based on that. So you just took 10% right there with that one industrial customer. So that tells me a lot when I look at the numbers. Why do I really care? Well, I have to tell DEQ on these fluctuations how much is really I&I and how much is in permitted industrial.
Have you reduced that to reports and given that to DEQ in the most recent 36 months?
How much is I&I and how much is...
Correct. You indicated you report to DEQ what you suspect is I&I. Have you reduced that to reports and given that to DEQ?
We report our flow to DEQ. We report overflow events to DEQ. If I know how much industrial water there is, I can then also report that. So these numbers are not reported to DEQ by me. They are reported by the customer.
Okay, that was my question. You indicated that you the authority had to report to DEQ what you thought was I&I. So that's not the case.
No, ma'am, that's not the case.
Okay,
We
just so we're
report
clear.
overflow events. We give a report to DEQ. And when we analyze our plant and do analysis, we look at flows and we look at the plant and quantify average daily flow.
How regularly do you give that report to DEQ?
DEQ comes in and does unannounced inspections on our plant, but we provide the compliance reports every time their officer comes down, and I think monthly, our monthly report goes to them, if not quarterly. I get it monthly, but it reports all of the events.
Okay, so specifically what you referenced, you think you report that to DEQ every month, likewise every quarter, and if they do a spot check that's unannounced?
Correct.
Okay.
That's our overall report of what kind of wastewater situation we have. So, if we look at the PMP plant, which again treats Pascagoula and Moss Point, that's why PMP, and look at the the EPA guidance on how the plant's sized, what wastewater flow it should see. If we look at the last year, the plant operated below an average daily threshold guidance of 104 days, above at 262 days that were classified as excessive, only 17 at that plant. So my takeaway from the report is, let's look at all our flow, let's quantify it and make sure we're capturing everything in the right place and make sure we're understanding everything we see. But the important thing is to engage my staff and the city staff, discuss these flow reports and ask questions as they go up and down. January is the last month that's booked so far, 4.32 million gallons a day was the average. And of course, we have daily flows, so we can look at those and see what happens. Usually when there's an event going on, I do pull that event and look at it and see what my takeaway is. I looked at all 4 plants yesterday. They behaved relatively the same, except the West Jackson plant did not move much. But that was a relatively small event. A lot of wind and lightning, but not a lot of rain. Has Pascagoula, another thing I look at is, where are you at that percentage before? Where do I have to go to get that? Well, because I want to see how the weather was then and all those different things that we could determine. I had to go backwards pretty far. If you look at 2005 through 6, 7, 8, 9, that data is not particularly good because of the way we were behind Katrina, so I usually skip that.
Which years do you skip?
5, 6, 7, 8 as far as trending, because everyone, that's just me when I'm trying to draw a personal conclusion. They're in the books, obviously, but I know it was dry the years behind Katrina. So if I want to look at a trend, sometimes I go backwards past that and see what was it coming up to Katrina. And I did find that 2005, it was 28.65% for this city. It's 28.8 the year before, and then it backed back down years prior to that to about 24, so, excuse me, 25. So my point is, it goes up and down in cycles, but I don't know that I can tie that to anything. It's just interesting data. So that's pretty much what I had on the flow report, just making sure that we have this as a tool, but this is a summary page of a lot of different data. It's average daily flow, it's average for the weeks and the months and the years. So yeah, it looks at the whole picture. But if we want to really get in and what's happening on the system, we should work together. We have some portable meters we can set up and help and go analyze those areas. And I think Mike has brought that to the city's attention very recently, and we will work together to go do that to see if we can drill down into some of this data and quantify some of these things specific to these permits. I think that'll be very helpful.
What permits are you referencing? Drill down as it relates to what permits?
The permits that the industries hold to discharge into the system.
Okay, so you guys are actively looking at the industrial customers that have permits, specifically through the city of Pascagoula. Is that correct?
We look at everyone who's permitted to come to our plant.
I meant specifically what you're talking about, reaching out and helping us and drilling down to it.
Yes.
So you're looking at the industrial customers for the city of Pascagoula. Is that right?
I would like to know who they are and look at the flow data that goes in, because otherwise I'm just pecking blind.
Okay. Do you have their contracts as well?
I do not. They don't
Just
have-
First Chemicals?
Just theirs. There are others outside of the city of Pascagoula. But this goes back to a meeting that we had with DEQ, and
Meaning the utility authority had?
we had it on October 9th, 2014, where we went over wholesale wastewater rate structure, pretreatment ordinance status, capital improvements, and collection system inspections. There was 2 pages of people that were there, but we're working on our pretreatment ordinance. We have to do that as part of an agreement with DEQ. And getting that in place, we were getting input from the cities. And that's kind of, we've been working on it since. That's in the hands of a consultant.
Do you have industrial customers that you deal with directly, that you have contracts with?
We do not.
But you have other customers that are outside the wholesaler agency customers, that 100 category, correct?
We do.
Do you have independent contracts with each of those?
Contracts, only the normal operator, the normal customer single page that you would have anywhere with a utility.
Is there something comparable to what you're referencing for First Chemical?
No, because we don't have any like that. This is an agreement. I said the word contract to be very clear. An agreement between First Chemical Corporation and the City of Pascagoula to discharge into the system. Because First Chemical has to obtain a permit from DEQ.
Okay. So you don't have any direct retail customers that have to have a permit with DEQ?
I'm not aware of any.
Okay.
All right, the mayor had asked me to speak a little bit about the Pascagoula plant and what we have done and where we are going on the relocation.
Well,
So-
Mayor, I've got a couple questions about the other matter. Would you rather handle those after the fact, the presentation, or handle those now?
I can do my best to handle them now. If I don't know the answer, I will jot it down and try to get it back to you.
You would agree that the information that you're referencing is basically, it's about 6 months or so out of a full flow year, correct?
It is 8 months.
Okay. And you would agree that there are years wherein Pascagoula has had more flow than we're seeing right now, if you look back to 2002, from the document you've referenced?
More flow
Absolutely.
or higher percentage?
Pick one.
I haven't seen any higher percentage, but I do not have all years in front of me. I can research that for you.
Okay, well, You would agree that even if, let's say, we stayed on course, Pascagoula, whatever our percentage or amount is for 2016 will be averaged with the 2 prior years, will it not?
Yes.
Okay.
To
And that,
do a new projection, but not to reconcile this year.
sure,
Each
sure.
closing year is reconciled to exactly what it is.
Okay. And once we take that 3-year average, that's what's applied to the utility authority budget to determine what the flat bill is to the city, correct?
Yes, that's a bit oversimplified, but essentially that's it.
Correct. You would agree it's budget-based billing?
Yes. Contract says we will do a budget no less than every year.
Okay. And it's the budget that drives the amount that the cities pay?
Based on the percentage of flow and actions of everyone else that may or may not be in your control.
Right. So whatever Pascagoula's share of the total wastewater treated is, that's what's going to be applied to the utility authority's budget and what we pay for the upcoming year.
Correct.
Okay. And would you agree that your costs today, your operating expenses, have almost tripled since 2010?
I do not believe they've tripled. I'd have to check that number.
Okay. Stephen, I've given you a slide, and I'm just going to hand you what, at least I've looked through the documents that you guys have. Mike was kind enough to deliver us the budgets for the authority dating back to about 2010. So we looked through, or I looked through those budgets to try and figure out how it is we're trending the way we have been for the past 36 months. And also, because for the past 6 months, we've been told flow, much as you've said here today, is the reason our costs have gone up 100%. But when I look at that, I don't find the data that supports it as it relates to flow. What I can see are the costs of the utility authority monumentally and astronomically increasing. In 2010, the operating expenses were $5.6 million. In 2016, they're now $18.4 million. Yet, when I look at the average daily flow for Pascagoula in 2010, it was 3.017. It actually barely went higher in 2016. When I look at our percentage of flow, in 2010, it was a little under 24%. In 2015, it's 27.9%, but yet the cost for the operating expenses for the utility authority are at almost $15 million. And correspondingly, the costs to the city of Pascagoula have virtually doubled.
Well, that's only a piece of the budget. I don't have everything in front of me to analyze those costs.
Okay. But you would agree it's not driven by flow, correct?
I would say that flow and your percentage of it is higher, so that drives cost, increase operating cost. Just like anything else, you have increases in personnel, increases mostly on equipment. It's not one thing, it's many things that drive cost.
I agree. And so when I look through your line item budgets and I look through those years, what I wanted to look at is, okay, do we have higher costs because of the assertions that it's flow? But when I look at chemicals and things along those lines that would be directly related to flow, those costs remain pretty consistent. What had gone up are the things that you've referenced: employee cost, deferred compensation, line items of depreciation of $1.4 million.
Yes, that's about $5 million short of what it should be.
So when the utility authority's budgets go up and our relative percentage stays about the same, the bill to the citizens of the city of Pascagoula goes up, correct?
That is correct. Also, in those budget years, there was about $50 million worth of construction accomplished at no additional cost to the citizens.
How
And,
much of that was in the retail segment?
The 50 is only not in the retail section. There was 115 or so million to JCUA. That 50 is on assets that serve everyone.
Right. But somehow in that process, which I can't understand, while your revenue has gone up, and then part of it's disappeared, which I get because they're federal grants, your costs have tripled.
I don't think 18 million accurately represents what we bill to the cities.
You're right. You take the 18 million and you subtract out the revenue from your retail side, your other clients. And so this year, for example, it got it down to about $13.9 million. If you apply the city's relative almost 27% to that, that's how we get now with a price tag of $3.85 million a year. Versus in 2013, our cost to the JCUA was $1.9 million. So for 6 months, we've heard this is rate driven, that every household or customer should only realize a $1.50 increase, that the city of Pascagoula is just lumping on cost. We have 7,699 customers. At $1.25 or $1.50 per customer, does that get us to $1.1 million that we're realizing this 12 months?
No, and it brings me to asking the very questions that you are. Why is my flow percentage higher if I can take the total amount of flow and the total cost and divide that out and come up with that number?
You're backing into it. You're taking the total cost and then dividing it by the usage. So I suggest to you, if we take your formula and apply it for each different city, your rate's going to ultimately be different.
Well, I will review that. Is that out there? Has that been sent to me?
I'll
You
give
have
it to you. I'll send it to you electronically, and you can take the copy and how many ever you need. Look, I appreciate your time in coming and certainly the opportunity to sit down. There's no question for all the cities that you serve, I&I is a component. However, in the document that you've referenced that goes back to 2002, that was created well before you and I got here, it demonstrates that the flow has remained relatively consistent with a minor variance above or below. And within this, at least this is the only information you guys have provided us. Within this is the I&I. So without question, we could all function more effectively, efficiently, and save dollars. But I&I is not the reason that we have seen almost 100% increase in costs in the past 30 months. And it's a disservice to tell the citizens of Pascagoula and Jackson County that that's why they have the increases, because it's just not accurate.
Any other questions on this before he moves into a couple comments on the plant? Any other questions on this? Comments?
No, I haven't seen
Okay.
it yet.
I have one question, Mayor, and I didn't see it. It's probably in here, I just missed it. How many employees does Jackson County Utility Authority currently employ?
We probably have 90-some. I know we have about 7 open, but the staff floats around there.
So how many, okay, so you have about 90 currently
Total.
active? Total? Okay, so some of those are open, but they're budgeted.
Correct.
I'm sorry, Freddie, did you say you're okay, or you had a
I'm
question?
okay, I have the data that kind of covers.
Okay, a couple minutes on the plant?
All right. PMP plant. I'm going to just hit a couple high points. This has to do with steps we've taken to evaluate relocation of that plant. I'm going to go back to 2006 because often I get asked okay, we got all that CDBG money, why didn't we move the plant with the CDBG money? So I'm going to read this statement. In evaluating requests for treatment plant relocation as part of the current plan, it was determined that constructing new treatment plants and conveyance systems to move the wastewater up to upland areas would consume the majority of the available CDBG disaster recovery grant funds. Secondly, in reviewing the flows and the capacity of the existing treatment plants, it was determined that all but one of these plants appeared to be sufficient to treat wastewater during the planning period. Therefore, it was determined that funding the relocation of treatment plant where treatment capacity is currently adequate would not be the most efficient use of funds. So basically, it was looked at, and often I get asked that, not by me, but I mean those that did the plan. And they determined that was not something they wanted to spend that money on.
Who was that they? Was it?
Mississippi Engineering Group, whoever DEQ hired, was referred to as MSEG. They developed the plan, and that was the conclusion they came to. So, in working with the city and the county, we have evaluated what are the next steps. So, the Utility Authority partnered with the Army Corps of Engineers and tried to move things forward. The first thing we did was to evaluate in 2010. We began the partnership with the Army Corps, and then we evaluated the plant on whether or not it was a vital part of upgrade and how long it needs to be where it is. And the conclusions were, in spite of the age of the plant, it had been maintained in relatively good condition following Hurricane Katrina. Most of the process equipment was repaired or replaced during recovery efforts. Recently updated DIRFM information provides evidence the Pascagoula Moss Point wastewater treatment plant is vulnerable to flooding issues. Whether flooding causes a facility to become completely inundated or simply isolated, flooding and storm surge will continue to be a problem and threaten continued operations of the facility, possibly causing a health hazard. Hydraulic capacity to treat the average daily flow of the treatment plant does not appear to be a significant issue at the time. However, the reported increase in I&I from operations staffs indicate there could be some deterioration in some of the pipelines at the plant. Although treatment facility is meeting MPDES permit levels, monitoring results of other parameters indicate the inability to meet expected newer and more stringent standards, modifications, upgrades. Recommendation: flooding, storm surge, and apparent inability to meet future NPDES limits are all problematic issues for the plant, and in most cases, further investigation would be warranted to analyze comparable cost of the facility at its existing location. So the point of all that was we needed something to say, should future upgrades for wastewater as they come in for permit changes, should the investment be made at that plant? Is it in a good location for that? And the conclusion was it's not the best location to invest for a long-time future. Now, part of that we do not know. We do not know nutrient limits yet. Mississippi continues to kick the can down the road. We start a new permit process next year for that plant, and they have told me they're probably not going to tell us what those are on that particular cycle, so they'll move it again. So it gets harder to incorporate that in our plans, but we will do our very best with that as it shapes. So that step was done. This is where you saw us boring under the plant to see, is it sitting on pilings? If we build and make substantial repairs, will it sit there? The plant is not on pilings, it's basically on a sand bed. So that had to be done as one of the steps. That one was done and closed. Next step was to look at the relocation, and that feasibility study was done, and the determination was made there are two potential sites, one east and one north, if you were going to consider moving the plant. So they've done that. They put price tags on what they thought it would cost, and in the middle of all that, we also did the odor study, and we recognize we have to do some repairs to the plant now, so some of those things that can be done there are being done in an upgrade. But that's kind of where we are on those plants. We're continuing with the Army Corps, have a meeting Thursday with the Army Corps of Engineers trying to take our next step, which would take a new location and new plant at 30% design. I think that's a critical step because you hear about shovel-ready projects. It's not if, it's when another storm comes. We'll be in much better position if we're ready to go. We've evaluated the site, and then we can pick up the ball running at 30%. So it's a rather expensive one. We're trying to get the Army Corps to pay 75% of that effort, but then it's here, and it'll hopefully have two options in it and leave us in a good position for that. So that's kind of where we are on that, Mayor, in a very rapid approach.
Any questions on this last subject?
The price tag you said they provided, you have that handy?
I have it in here somewhere. I took the book apart so I could talk to just the high points.
We'll get it afterward.
You can give it to us later.
Just share it, and we'll share it around. Thanks, Tommy.
I do have one question, Tommy. When you guys had your meeting, you had the engineers that all came out for the cities with the relative projects
Yes.
for the work that was going to be done in part pursuant to the bond. Great group of guys that you've got out of Louisiana working on the Pascagoula plant. They were extremely informative, had a lot of great ideas. We probably had about 7 folks there, our engineer as well, from the city of Pascagoula, engaging with them for well over an hour. They had some really interesting ideas and suggestions that aren't necessarily part of that contemplated body of work when you reached out to them, but had to do with some additional like remedial efforts that the price tag, at least as they were chatting, wasn't shocking, that
Okay.
would help capture the odor. Are you guys willing to engage with some conversations with the city as well as those engineers as to what the possibilities might be on top of the work that you're looking at our Pascagoula plant, such that we could focus additionally on the odor, such that we could have some possible success in development of the riverfront?
Absolutely. In fact, I've had some dialogue. Our general manager is in training this week, but that group has reached another design milestone, and we're trying to pick a spot. As you can appreciate,
Sure.
regular meetings get kind of cumbersome. So I'm going to ask them to schedule a workshop that allows our directors to look at. We will absolutely notice the city of Pascagoula and Moss Point again to join in that discussion and hear what they have to say.
Yeah, if you could just do a plain language, invite, hey, this is when we're going to chat about some of the specifics of the design. They had done some projects in other locations that the plant was similar to ours, had the odor issues, so they have done a couple of things that had, at least in those areas, had a modicum of success. So it would be interesting to see if that might be an alternative for us, and I know y'all probably took a little bit more out on the bond than you originally contemplated. If we could get some of those things wrapped in there, that would be nice for the city as well.
Well, I expect to have that meeting on the books sometime in March.
Okay.
Because we have some decisions with nutrient and what we know, we've got
Right.
to choose left or right.
Okay. Well,
So we will
appreciate your
notify
time
you.
very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Tommy.
Yeah, thanks, Tommy. What I do is want to make sure that we go away with clear messages, and we have 2 tonight. One is around this last subject, which is the plant. We want to move the plant, okay? We want to move that plant, and not 30 years from now, but sometime in the nearer future. The odor's an additional problem. We just got done talking about that. We want to do what we can in the short term. Second message is we're not happy with the costs for doing that. We want to continue to partner with you and try to understand any guidance you can give us, any learnings and experience, and we'll do the same on our side to understand how we can reduce, spread out, stretch over, eliminate costs, and be as efficient as we can. The things that we would also say is we do appreciate the reliability that you provide us for the wastewater treatment, et cetera. The fact that you keep costs down by having efficient and good plants that don't produce fines, which would eventually be something we'd have to pay for. Additionally, there are people out there working hard every day on your staff that help us do this work, and we appreciate that they work safely and efficiently. So you pass that back to us. We just need to sort out this business end of it.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.